Amen. I'll tell you what, I love these moments of worship that we get to be a part of here at Harvester, don't you? What I love about these people, just great musicians and singers, but also just the presence that they bring into worship. We're going to have a night of worship next week, and we're going to be led by these friends. And so I hope that August 2nd, if you are free, that you'll just pack this place out and just bring whatever going on in life and just present that to God. We're in this series where we're talking about what it looks like to present ourselves to God. And I don't know where you get to present your heart to God often outside of this week. A lot is going on in your week, and I know this is one of those places where you get to experience that. Night of worship is definitely one of those places for me and my family where we get to do that. So I hope you'll join us. We are in a series right now where we are talking about our bodies, our souls, and today we're going to talk about our minds. There's the people who study beforehand. You guys knew there was going to be a test. We're going to be talking about our minds today. We're talking about what we present to God. And we talked about our bodies the first week. We talked about our souls last week. And today we're going to talk about our minds. And I want to remind you of a concept that we started this series out with. And it's a concept that the world tries to press onto us and conform us into. And it's this idea that you are a separate person within a person. The world will try to take you and tell you that your body is different than your soul. And so keep those things apart, that your mind is different than your soul and your body. So keep those things apart. But what we're finding out by looking through scriptures is that the Bible tells us something completely different about the way that we are wired, that we are a unified whole. Yes, we have a body. Yes, we have a soul. And yes, we have a mind. But the way those are intended to function is in unison with one another, not divided from one another. So when you come into places like this into worship, bring it all with you. You don't need to leave your mind outside. You don't need to leave your heart outside and just use your mind. You can bring all of that together. And what I want to do today is talk about that mind. I think this is something that we find ourselves on different sides of the spectrum. Some people are just really in love with the mind. Other people, not so in love with the mind. And so what I want to talk about today is 3 approaches to the mind and how we bring our mind to the circumstances around us, but also how we bring them to God. And so if you have the Harvester Christian Church app, you can pull that up. I've put the notes in there, the scriptures in there we're going to use. If you don't have the app, by the way, just go to your app store, download it, search for Harvester Christian Church, and then it'll be right there, I promise you. But I want you to have these scriptures and notes as we walk throughout this series and this week. And in there, you'll see this, that there's 3 common approaches to the mind. And the first one that you can fill in if you're taking notes is this. One of the common approaches is the mystical mind. That's how we view our mind, some of us, is that the mind is mystical, or we approach the mind with this idea of mysticism where I need to disengage the mind so that I can engage the spirit, so that I can engage the soul. A lot of people will say, in order to attain spiritual maturity or to grow in spiritual maturity, you need to learn how to turn the mind off, to disengage it, to put it on the shelf so that you can sit in places like this and just be and feel and experience and emote. And the way you do that is by you disengage the mind so that you can access that part of who you are. And this is a very popular concept in Eastern mysticism. In Eastern mysticism, Hindu, Buddhism, Krishna, it's the idea that we have to turn the mind off. We have to empty the mind so that we can fully experience who we are, so we can fully experience the world around us. And so that's where you'll see like meditation or the little statue of the guy eating grapes and things of that nature. That's where yoga has come from. It's this idea of Eastern mysticism of calm the mind so you can empty the mind so you can experience the world around you. But it's not just an Eastern mysticism thing anymore. Now it's something that has really creeped into the Western culture and the Western mindset. At one point, Western culture was known as, intellectualism, and now it's more ditching that to go towards emotionalism or experientialism. And so we've got yoga, and then Suburban girls got a hold of it in America and added lattes into the yoga and spandex that we're just gonna wear all the time in the yoga. And that's not enough, so let's put goats into the yoga as well. And we've just kind of made it our own thing. And it hasn't just stopped there, but it's also gotten into many church circles and settings as well, where many people are more interested these days, it seems like, in spiritual experiences than spiritual truths. Have you noticed this, that some segments of the church Christian population just is really drawn to the moments of worship and the feelings of worship, despite some of the theology and the words in those worship songs. And it's because it doesn't matter intellectually what is being said. What matters is how it makes me feel. Like I want to sit in those spaces and I want to shut the mind off. I don't want to think. I don't want to engage intellectually in worship. I want to just get goosebumps. I want to get that feeling. I want to get that emotion that comes with it. And so then we will sit in prayer and we'll try to remove ourselves from complete thought and we'll try to disengage the mind so that we can focus on the Spirit. And can I tell you that it's not just the Western culture, it's not just the American culture, American church, but it was also the early church as well. Paul, he writes this letter to 1 Corinthians, and they were having issues in their worship service. And this is one of the issues where they would come to the service together, they would gather together, and they would engage the heart, they would engage the Spirit. They were looking for the miraculous experience. They were looking for the Spirit to show up and do something incredible. And the way they would do that was disengage the mind, turn off the mind, turn off the thought. And Paul, what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 15, he says, here's what I do. He's like, when I approach these worships, he's like, what am I to do here? Well, here's what I do. I will pray with my spirit. I will use my spirit. I will want the Holy Spirit to interact and be present and do his things, but I will pray with my mind also. He's not segregating the mind from the spirit. The world wants us to segregate the mind and spirit. He says, keep those things together. And he says, I will sing praise with my spirit. Can I tell you, I love singing praise with my spirit. I love those moments in worship where like something's happening. But Paul says, I will do that with my spirit, but I will sing with my mind also. We can't separate the two. The mystical mindset in Christianity is to put that mind on the shelf so that you can engage the Spirit. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Nikomas, isn't one of our values at Harvester Christian Church contemplative and communal? Like if we're gonna become like Jesus, then we need to do contemplative practices and not just small groups and communal practices as well. What do we do with that? Should we run away from contemplative practices? My answer to that would be a resounding no. No, we should not. I know there's some practices in Eastern mysticism that practically seem similar, but when you look at contemplative practices in the Bible, there's a different goal in mind, a different mindset that we have to keep in mind. In fact, I believe that our Western culture has lost the art of biblical contemplative practices. Practices such as prayer. Practices such as moments of stillness. I mean, look at your average worship service in our country. What happens? It's activity all the way through the door up to this moment. And we got to keep people entertained, active, keep the mind going, song, communion, offering, message, song, bye, out of here. And we've lost the art of sitting still and experiencing what's happening around us. We've lost the art of doing that in our alone time, of having these times of meditation. And I'll tell you, prayer is scriptural. Stillness is scriptural. Meditation is scriptural. And we don't need to fear them so long as we keep the biblical emphasis within them. So what sets Christian tradition apart when it comes to these things like meditation? Well, the Christian tradition uses meditation not as a way to empty the mind, but as a way to engage the mind. That's a huge difference. Our tradition, whenever we see meditation mentioned in the scriptures, and you look through the scriptures and it's mentioned 19 different times where people are practicing meditation, it's not as a way to empty what's happening up here so we can just feel, and not think anymore, but rather it's a way to engage the mind. Our emphasis is not shut the mind down. Our emphasis is still the chaos that's happening in the mind. Calm the chaos that's happening in the mind. Some of you, that's what you're experiencing right now. There's just chaos happening in your mind. There's worry happening in your mind. There's your schedule you're thinking about, anxieties that you're thinking about. The mind won't stop racing. The emphasis of the Christian version of contemplative practice is to still that so that you can create space for thought. So that you can create space to think on God and his word and God and his works. When we see meditation happening in the Psalms, in particular Psalm 119 is a really, really good psalm that just really talks about meditation. What he talks about is, I meditate on your word day and night. Or I meditate on what you've done. He refers back to often what happened with Moses in the Exodus, or what happened with the fathers of Abraham and Isaac. And he's like, I still my mind, I still my heart, I sit in prayer contemplatively, and I still all of that chaos, not because my mind is evil, but because my mind is in need of the word of God and to remember what he's done in the past, so that those can inform what's going on in my heart and my mind and in my body, in my life today. One of my favorite passages that we use in our family for our kids a lot is be still. We got some active kids, I'll tell you that. And so in our living room, it says be still. And I love leaning into that passage because we don't practice stillness enough. But I also love what comes next. It says be still and know that I am God. Not just be still and empty yourself, not just be still and silent, but in that silence, allow the mind to be engaged to know. Unfortunately, the mystical mind will say, disengage the mind to fill the soul. Now, there's another side of the spectrum that I think a lot of other people in the Christian settings lean into, and it's not the mystical mind. In fact, they push away from that, and they're drawn towards the academic mind, the academic's mind. They're a little bit opposite. They would say, don't disengage the mind. In fact, what you need to do is disengage the soul so that you can fully engage the mind, so that you can fill the mind. They would sit in a church service and say, you know what? Let's get rid of the emotion. Let's get rid of the feeling. I don't experience God that way. I'm not interested in the tears. I'm not interested in the joy. What I want is the information. And these people have learned to turn off that heart, turn off that soul, so that they can fill the mind. I was reading a commentary this week, and they put it this way. They said, theology in isolation promotes barren intellectualism. Now, that was an academic mind that wrote that. But I love the heart of it, that theology, the understanding, the taking of truths of God and scriptures and trying to figure out how they fit together, when you do that in isolation of the heart, when you do that in isolation of the real world, of what's happening around us and the experiences that people are going through around us, all that does is promote barren intellectualism. It's this emptiness where your mind is full, but it's uselessly full. You know, one of the things I'm discovering about being a pastor is that I used to think that, man, the role of the sermon is to teach the congregation new information. That they're not reading their Bibles, they don't know anything about the word, they haven't heard the truths of God, so my role is to present it in a way that they understand. What I'm beginning to realize is that you guys know the word. You know what God says. I mean, there's always more to learn. But what I'm beginning to realize is more and more is my role is more to take what you know and tie it to the heart. Tie it to the practical. Tie it to the practice of using it. To take this information that we've kept in our mind and show you how to take that information and connect it to your life and connect it to your heart. You remember growing up as a teenager, and maybe some of you teens here today are going through this right now, where you sit in math class and you just begin to wonder why you're sitting there? Anybody just love math, love algebra, love geometry? All right, 1, 2, 3. Anybody else on the opposite end of that? The rest of us? Yeah. And here's what the rest of us thought when we sat in class. I remember sitting in high school algebra, and Mrs. Poole, she was a great teacher. Didn't learn anything from her though, but great person. I just remember thinking, as she's teaching me all these formulas to memorize, when am I ever gonna use this? Anybody ever think that? And then they tell you can't use a calculator because in the future you'll never have a calculator with you at all times. Mrs. Poole, you were wrong. But I do remember thinking, show me how to apply this. And rightly so, I did apply some of it in the youth ministry world. I had to figure out how to feed 200 kids with how many pizzas. I had to do some formula there. But other than that, for me, it was like, I don't know how I'm going to apply this. And what I love about the teenage mind is they're not opposed to information. They're not opposed to knowledge, but they want to know, what is the use of this knowledge? And can I tell you, I love that attitude, and I wish we would take that more into our faith. That we're not opposed to knowledge. We want to engage the brain, but I need to know, how does this work itself out in my life, in my day-to-day interactions, in my marriage, with my kids, with my friends, in my classes? How does this work? How does this apply? I'll be honest with you, I think we need more knowledge in the church. I think maybe too big of a segment is fading towards shutting the brain off for the emotional experience. But what I think we need with that knowledge is not just knowledge for information, but knowledge for application as well. There's so many people like, give me another Bible study, 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 give me another Bible study. I need more and more information. And I want to do more Bible studies. We need to do more Bible studies, but what I really hope for and really desire is not just people in those Bible studies who uses that information to make themselves feel smart. I think often the academic mind grabs onto information, stores it in the brain so that I can teach others, or so that I can use this information to correct others, or so that I can use this information because I've got a coworker that I need to debate and I need to combat them with this kind of information. And we separate information from ourselves. We like application, but we want to apply it to the other person. I don't want to go to a class, I want to teach the class. I want to use this information and drop it on someone else's lap and then go home and never really apply it to my heart. I'll tell you this, the Christian mindset is not just information for information's purposes. The goal isn't more information attained, but more transformation attained from that information. So we need to lean into the academic. We need to lean into the spirit side of it. And I think that's what the third approach does. And this third approach is the biblical approach that I would see. And it kind of takes some of this and puts it all together. And the biblical approach is this. It's the transformed mind. It's not just a mystical mind. It's not just an academic mind, but it's a mind that is leaning towards transformation, seeking transformation, a mind that desires to be formed. This is a mind that engages the body while it's engaging the soul and while it's engaging the mind, and it engages these things in unison. It doesn't separate them apart, but it's all happening together. We see this in Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 3, I want to look at real quick. And just kind of look at what a transformed mind looks like. It starts with the Apostle Paul saying this. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies, underline that in your passage, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. You can underline that in your passage. This is your spiritual worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. What I love in this very short passage, it ends with the transformed mind, and you know what it starts with? Or transformed self, what it starts with is, a renewed mind, a physical body that's offered, and a spiritual act of worship. Body, spirit, and mind together in unison leads towards this transformation that happens. And that's what I think we should be seeking, not just spiritual experiences, but transformation. Not just spiritual information, but transformation. It goes on to say this, and verse 2 and 3 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to. A few things that he points out here about the transformed mind. First is this, that a transformed mind is a questioning mind. That's what a transformed mind does, it questions. I think some of us are afraid to question information that comes into our mind. If you look at the average Christian's worldview, I would tell you that it's not a Christian worldview. Surely there is Christian elements in that worldview, and then there's political elements in that worldview, and then there's cultural elements in that worldview, and there's regional elements in that worldview. There's entertainment in their view, and Hollywood's view of everything in that worldview. And then we take that all together, and you know what we have? We have a mind that has been conformed rather than transformed. A mind that's been conformed instead of being transformed. What Paul says is, by testing, you may discern. If you want a transformed mind, question, ask, examine, evaluate, and don't be afraid of that. Here's what I realize about some of you. Some of you sit here right now with a questioning mind. Praise God for that. You're hearing information and you're examining it, you're evaluating it. I think we need to ask questions. I think a lot of people in the church is afraid of a doubting church, that a doubting church is somehow an unspiritual church. I'm not so concerned with the doubts in the church. I don't think that we have too much doubt. I think possibly we have too little testing. I think that's what we have. Man, a testing church, they're saying, let me hear this and let me test it. What you're saying, Nikomas, let me test it to God's word. Politics, I hear what you're saying, let me test it to God's word and God's will. Culture and movies that I'm watching, I hear what you're saying, and it seems loving and caring, but let me test it to God's word. A transformed mind is not afraid to question. A transformed mind also, secondly, also accepts. It also accepts. By testing, you may discern what? Well, what is the will of God? Which is good and acceptable and perfect. I don't know if you've been like me and you've gotten to a point in trying to study and research God's heart on things, and maybe you love theology as much as I do and love tying scriptures together to figure out what the heart of God is. There's been various issues where I've gotten to the point of, I got all the passages, I see all the passages, and I'm stuck. I'm stuck. What do I do with this? Eventually, what the transformed mind begins to realize is that there's a mind above my mind. There's a mind over my mind. And so the role of the transformed mind is not to figure out what my mind and my will is, but the transformed mind tries to test and discern what is the will of the mind above my mind. They can understand all things. I'll tell you this, my ability to understand God is limited. Your ability to understand God fully is limited. So what do? Here's what I do. I lean into what I know about God. I lean into what I know about. And what do I know about God? I know that God is good, and I know that God is perfect. You look at verse 2 here. We're trying to figure out what the will of God is, which is good, acceptable, and perfect. Here's what I know about God. When I don't understand him fully, here's what I know. God, you are good. In this situation even, in this pain even, I don't understand why this would happen, but I know you're good, and I know your will and your way is perfect. And so what's the response of a transformed mind? It says, God, if you're good and if you're perfect, you're also acceptable. The situation is also acceptable. My inability to fully understand in my mind what's happening, it's acceptable because I trust that you are good and perfect. A transformed mind questions, a transformed mind accepts, and then thirdly, a transformed mind is also humble. This is where I think maybe some minds kind of lack some biblical flavor to it. Transformed mind is humble. Paul says it this way in verse 3. In talking about the transformed mind, this is kind of how he warns everybody. He says, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. I like that. He's like, I want you to bring your bodies as a spiritual act of worship. I want you to engage the Spirit in that worship. I want God to take your mind and renew it so that it can be transformed. I don't want you just to have spiritual experiences, even though I want you to have that. I want you to have information, but not to the point of you begin to gain pride from that information. Can I tell you, this is where I see the mind going often in the church. It's to this place of pride. And typically it comes from the academic mind of, I've got all of this information, and now I need to show you my information. I need to impress you with my information. And here's what I would tell you about information. The right information with the wrong heart is the wrong message of Jesus. It's not the message of Jesus. The right info with the wrong heart is the wrong message. Here's what the wrong heart tends to do when the mind is full. Knowledge often seeks a stage. Knowledge often seeks an influence. Knowledge, apart from the heart, often seeks a following. I've been recently, maybe the last year or so, been getting videos in my social media feed, Facebook and Instagram. They're beginning to understand who I am. And so they're feeding me things that they think that I would enjoy. And recently, Instagram Reels is like, we found out you're a preacher. Here's some videos of street preachers that we think that you would love and connect with. Have you seen videos of street preachers going around the internet? This is the guys who go out on the street and they're in these college campus settings or they're in these urban squares and they've got the microphone and the loud system around them and they're giving all of this information about God and the Bible and they've studied and they know the word and they've memorized it and they're preaching it out, typically yelling, and they're surrounded by a crowd of people who could care less. But what do? They keep preaching, and there's often this combative nature that comes with it. And I often wonder, are you there for these people? Do you care about these people, or are you there to impress us with your knowledge? Are you there to impress us with your knowledge? Well, we're there for the people. Then why is the camera set up? Why is the person recording you arguing, debating with this crowd of people? Is this video for the people, or is it for your following? Is it for your stage? Is it for your influence? Are you concerned with conversions, or are you concerned with combating? I love what Paul says here. He says, I say to every one of you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think. A transformed mind knows that I want information, I'm gonna question, I'm gonna process, I'm gonna accept the truth. But I also know that I may not have all the answers. I also know and assume that maybe in conversation you have something that God is doing in you or that God has shown to you that can form me and fill me. A transformed mind doesn't just care about its mind, it cares about the other minds in the room as well. As we wrap up here, I just want to conclude with just one side note that it's just kind of been laid on my heart in studying this and looking through, especially Romans 12, and it's this question. What do you do when your body and your soul and your mind are out of sync with one another? Because while we're talking about how we're this unified being, often within that, there's conflict in the midst of it. where the mind and the body, they're just out of sync, and the mind, it can't understand the body. Where the mind, it looks at the spirit, the soul. We talked about last week soul wounds and how painful those are. And often the mind evaluates and reevaluates and relives those wounds that happen on the soul, and we can't quite piece it all together about the whys and the whats and the why me and why now. And I'll tell you one thing I've learned about God is that God usually doesn't change my circumstances, but he regularly changes my mind. Have you experienced that? I think often our prayer when we approach God is, God, get me out of this circumstance. End this circumstance. Change this circumstance. Sometimes God does that. More often, what I've personally experienced is that God changes my mind within the circumstance. He gives me a different perspective of what I'm going through. He lets me engage the heart in ways that I've never engaged before, or the mind in ways, or he shows me a bigger picture of what's happening as I'm walking through the circumstance. And when I take that knowledge of those circumstances into this question, I think we get a similar answer. What do we do when our minds and bodies are out of sync? Well, what I've often seen is that God doesn't change the circumstance, he changes the mind. God doesn't change the body. God doesn't change the wound and remove it and get rid of it. What he often does is he renews the mind, and he begins to allow us to see it in different ways. I think this is important to grab a hold of, because I think a lot of people in our world today are sitting there with a mind and body that's just out of sync, and it's tearing their life apart. We see this in instances of gender dysphoria, where the mind sees a different body and doesn't know what to do, and it's out of sync. We see this with eating disorders, where a person will just look at their body and see something different than what the rest of the world sees. We'll see this with body imaging issues, where people will scroll through social media or look around them and just be concerned that I don't look that way, and what's wrong with my body? I think often what we try to do is we try to get them on the same page and in an opposite fashion than what I think God might desire. And I think many people's minds and bodies are on different pages, and I think that struggle is real for many people. But let me share the grace of Christianity that we see here in Romans chapter 12. And it's this grace, that you are valuable and loved. Your body, your spirit, and your mind is valuable and loved. And you don't need hormones or surgeries to make that body valuable and loved. You don't need to starve your body or wrestle with shame to make that body and that soul and that mind loved. Here's what Romans 12 verses 1 and 2 would tell us. When your mind and body are out of sync, take that body and offer that body as a spiritual act of worship, holy and acceptable to God. It may not be holy to you, it may not be acceptable to you. Take that body and offer it to God and say, God, this is what I have, and I don't understand it, and it causes me pain, and I'm confused by it, but I take what I have and I sacrifice it to you as a living sacrifice that doesn't experience death, but it experiences life, and I offer that to you as my spiritual worship. And ask that you renew my mind. Give me a different perspective on me. Help me to see me in the way that you see me. Help me to test what the world is saying and discern what the world is saying, and let me test and hear and see and experience and believe and be informed on what you are saying about me. Because here's what I believe about you, God. You are good. You are acceptable. And you are perfect. A renewed mind, that's what renews our hope. A renewed mind, that's what makes our decisions. It's our decisions that impact our souls and our body. And so God says, if you want to be transformed, offer me your mind so that I can renew it. Amen? Amen. Will you stand with me? I want to pray. God, we approach you in this passage and in Romans, and it's a passage that has been poured over for hundreds of years and has offered hope to countless people. And Father, my prayer right now is that you offer hope to us, that you show us our minds and you show us how to engage them. And God, allow us the courage to engage with our spirits, with our emotion, with our being, in times of stillness, but also in times of community and worship like this. And God, my prayer is that as we step into these settings with our mind and our spirit and our bodies, that you begin to do a work in us, that you begin to transform us from the inside out. We pray this in the name of Jesus, and everybody say it with me. Amen.